Hi, welcome back to Sociology 226. This is Max Weber, Video 1. In this video I've got three goals. First, I want to describe the life of Max Weber. Secondly, I want to explore Max Weber's sociological project, which is an interpretive social science. And finally, I want to get you ready to do the readings. Let's do it. Max Weber was born 1864, and throughout his whole life he was torn between two tasks: being an academic and being a lawyer. Should I be a scholar or a practicing lawyer, he kept asking himself. Neither of these jobs are particularly exciting. In school, they say, he avoided the question by joining a dueling fraternity and drinking a great amount of beer. He'd likely fit right in at Queen's. His mother set him straight, apparently, though he did get a scar from a sword on his face, which was apparently one of the coolest things you could have back then among the German aristocracy. Weber eventually settled into the academic life, at least for a time. His approach was to establish a unified social science, combining perspectives from economics, religion, sociology, political studies, etc. In each case, Weber's aims are to come up with a complex understanding of the reason and meanings held by individual actors. Sociology, then, has a deep relationship with all of the other disciplines that give a characterization of the context in which actions and decisions happen. The goal is an interpretive framework within which to situate sociological phenomena. Simply put, Weberian sociology looks for meaning. While Marxist sociologists look for socioeconomic struggle, and while Durkheimian sociologists look for moral attachments that constitute the social organism, Weberian sociologists look to come up with an explanation for those meaning structures that guide individual and collective action. So, not ideology as Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels would have it, but motivation. Not a shared collective morality, as Emil Durkheim looks for, but the ethics that we apply in our everyday lives. For Weber, it is the meaningful basis of social action that is the true sociological object. Weber is a meticulous writer and thinker. We can see this in his definition of sociology. Weber is not as bombastic as Marx or Durkheim. What he lacks in flash, he makes up for in precision. We find in his basic concepts an extremely clear definition of what sociology is and what the object of that science should be. Sociology is that science which aims at the interpretive understanding of social behavior to gain an explanation of its causes, its courses, and its effects. So the job of the social scientist is simply to interpret. This is very important. Not to determine laws like the past two guys, but to give an interpretation of a particular phenomenon that qualifies as social. Keep this in mind throughout the videos and the readings. We are not looking for laws that cause behavior. We are trying to explore the meaning and motivation behind that behavior. This is a much more humble enterprise than that of Marx or Durkheim. They want laws. Weber is much happier to get an understanding of what might have led to a particular historical or present-day act. Even though he isn't looking for laws, he is still very meticulous about the process of doing sociology, as you see in his writing. Let's look to Weber's understanding of social action, crucial for his sociological approach. We call the Weberian method interpretive because the point is to interpret phenomena according to a scheme that makes its meaningful basis available to us. Sometimes we call this method hermeneutic, based on the study of sacred texts. Rather than study the intricacies of the Bible, though, we are studying the intricacies of meanings that people attach to things and what causes them to act the way they do. Thus, Weber's definition of sociology. Sociology follows social action, defined as follows. Action signifies human conduct that is associated with subjective meaning, but an action is social action when its intended meaning takes account of the behavior of others and is thereby oriented in its unfolding. The point of Weberian sociology is not to come up with its own method that is distinct from economics or psychology. It is just to follow around a particular kind of action that meets these criteria. The methods are not distinct from the other social sciences, simply its object. There's an awful lot going on there. Let's look at the passage more closely. First, the focus is on meaning, the importance attached to various entities by those who perform action in and amongst them. Weber's focus remains on interpreting meaning. Secondly, subjective. The term subjective, or references to the subject, are going to come up again and again throughout this course. In sociology, we use the term in three very important senses. First, linguistic. Think about the subject of a sentence. This is the use of subject in the grammatical sense. Consider the statement, "the king is bald." the king is the subject of the sentence, and his lack of hair being the predicate. When we talk about subjects, we are talking about the signification of a particular type of being under discussion. In this case, royalty. Next, philosophical. When we say to someone, that's subjective, what do we mean? We mean that you have a particular viewpoint on the object in question, but it is just your opinion. Subjective is usually used here to refer to a particular take on something, but a very personal one. It's just a personal opinion. Not shared, not universally true, but restricted to you. In this sense, consider the statement, I believe the king looks good bald. This is an opinion held by me in search of verification. Until then, it is subjective. Is the king a 6 or an 8? I don't know. Until we do, subjective. Finally, political. The king, bald as he may be, is also in charge. I am one of the king's subjects if I live in his kingdom. He gets to tell me what to do, and I do it if I know what's good for me. Remember the subject, linguistic, philosophical, political. This use leans towards the philosophical one. Meanings are subjective because they are not objectively so. The meanings are affixed to them by historically situated actors. They vary. Meanings change with those who are so situated. So, social action is the culmination of both of these things, when people make up meanings together and interpret the meanings of others when making up their minds to do things. The aim is to come up with an account of the 1. Meaningful environment where 2. Subjects undertake, 3. A particular course of social action. 1. Meaning. 2. Subjects. 3. Social action. Let's explore the methodology that Weber uses to discover the meaningful basis of social action. We have an issue. If the goal of social science is understanding, we have a significant methodological problem. How do I place myself in the shoes of another and know, with any certainty, that I have the same meaningful thought process that they do? Let's use Weber's example. How can I know what caused Julius Caesar to act like Julius Caesar? Well, ultimately I can't. One's history or even personality are far too complicated to simply reduce to a single variable or a single sentence. What we can do is describe the structure of Caesar's action in comparing him to other Roman emperors, about the power they collectively wielded, the books they read, the fears they wrote about, and so on and so forth. While we don't have a complete description of Caesar's psychology, we can situate his actions against a historical backdrop and the kind of political capabilities that Roman emperors had. We can get a picture of his headspace. Is all of this 100% true, eternally, and a complete picture of Caesar? No, and to ask for anything more than that is hubris. We get a pretty good idea. This, then, is Weber's humble solution. Is it definitive? No. Do we know fully whether this corresponded to their reality? Also no. But here we have, again, a very different way of thinking about the role of sociology. Sociology is, as we have already seen, the interpretation of meaningful action structures made in concert. This sketch of Caesar's life is what Weber will call an ideal type. Remember, for Weber, sociology is coming up with a meaningful landscape underpinning social action. The point is to elaborate those attachments that guide us to do stuff. What makes sociology a social science, or anything a social science, is the ability to come up with a common conceptual language, a shared methodology that lets us do so. Just as in everyday life, we make subjective evaluations of things. In sociology, we cannot come up with a definitive account of social reality. Things change throughout history, and there is no divine standpoint accessible to the social scientist through which to say something is such and such. What we can do, however, is come up with a common, distanced, and yet meaningful set of concepts through which to interrogate human action, and the entities that help shape it. For this, we have ideal types. Let's start by considering lay typologies. When I brought up Caesar, you didn't just think about the guy in the pizza box. You think about a few key attributes. Roman columns, red capes, that one haircut that everybody had in the late 90s. Weber is going to suggest that each form of meaningful human action involves the constitution of such meaningful typologies. Now, we don't just come up with typical people, but also institutions. We can come up with a sketch of what post offices around the world look like without reference to a particular schematic of one physical one. Letters go in, they tend to be organized in a hierarchical fashion, with the postmaster general at the top and letter carriers throughout. Now, the post office has changed historically,
This will impact our understanding. People used to send each other letters. Now you just buy lip gloss from Amazon. But when I say post office, you have a typical post office in mind and come up with a characteristic portrait of the postal ecosystem. What distinguishes ideal types from lay types is that they are shared and refined somewhat by others of the same vocation. Weber has a theory of knowledge that all people establish types representing only partially ultimate reality. Weber has a sociological methodology that accepts the inevitability of these partial accounts, and that sociologists themselves participate in their partiality. What are some examples? Any concept or object that sociology focuses on. Caesar, as an object of historical sociological inquiry, fits the bill, or the objects which Weber himself takes as his object. Bureaucracy, Protestantism, charismatic authority, these all qualify.
Marx, Durkheim, and Weber are often referred to as the big three forefathers of sociology.
We can now see where Weberian sociology fits into the bigger picture alongside Marx and Durkheim. We go from economic factors to social facts and moral order to a more humble type of interpretation of the causes of action. Make no mistake, the social scientist is methodological, but she understands that her analysis is only a partial take on things understood as social facts. To Capital and Suicide, we add Weber's Economy and Society. It is a fractured work addressing all of the social sciences with an extremely broad scope of subject: economics, politics, the world religions. Society gets held together neither by economic forces or vague solidarity, but submission to authority. We see this in all forms named social action, the object of our humble science. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to do Weberian sociology, just as I did for Marx and Durkheim in the past.
Speaking of authority, it's time for me to tell you to do the readings. Read the Concise Encyclopedia of Sociology article before reading Weber on authority.